Hey everyone, and welcome to the Global Post-Trade Working Group update, where we'll give you a very quick rundown on any of the new changes that have been implemented in the post-trade community, as well as updates on the future initiatives and the progress against those items. As an introduction, my name is Laurence Jones. I co-chair the Global Post-Trade Working Group, with my day job being at Trana in post-trade strategy. So how do we fit into the wider FIX community? It's a very good question. We get asked it quite a lot. I think it's really very relevant just to give you guys a quick overview of kind of who we are and how we plug into the wider FIX ecosystem. So the FIX community itself was formed in the early 90s, which is longer than I've been in the industry. And I think it's just really testament to its importance and position in both the derivatives and capital market space. It's really evolved throughout the years from being predominantly an electronic execution, electronic trading set of standards, into now promoting best practices and what we call a clean set of standards throughout the post-trade lifecycle. We've got a little over 200 members in the post-trade working group, which is great. This is a global group, and this ranges from some of the world's largest global investment management firms, big custodians, and it goes right the way through to CCPs, exchanges, and some of the vendors and service providers. The group itself is really focused around collaboration and innovation to solve industry problems. And where possible, we really want this to be interoperable, and we really want to ensure that we have consensus from across the industry. We'd probably be the first to say that we're a by the industry for the industry group. So when you think of a trade or position, you have some pre-trade, then you execute, and of course, definitely not trying to simplify that workflow at all, but it's highly electronic in nature now. But then downstream, there's a whole host of processes through T0 and then into T plus N that go through trade allocations, trade confirmation, trade matching. You may consider submitting that trade into clearing, or maybe it's a PB give up trade, or it could just be an outright bilateral flow. But irrelevant of that, you really need to take that right the way down into the later stages of the post-trade lifecycle, where ultimately the trade settles. Now, FIX through its expansion is definitely becoming what we call much more of a full life cycle. The set of standards does allow continuation of a messaging language. It allows a firm to adopt a set messaging format, and therefore really gives the optionality for a bit more consistency throughout your trade flow. This diagram here in green shows what FIX today has enabled the industry to work on. So as I mentioned, we have some of the pre-trade, we have the trade, the order management, placement, execution, right the way through allocation, confirmation, and into CCP. The amber pieces are what we're working on. So there's 3 amber arrows at the bottom and 1 at the top. This kind of leads me quite well into the periodic payments work that we've done. So in Q3 last year, what we did is we promoted a new set of standards, which we'd spent a significant amount of time on in the industry, working as a group. We promoted that to the FIX community, and it really now allows participants to send and receive data relating to cash flows. So when I say cash flow, if you think resets, premiums, coupons, dividends, P&I, there's 71 different cash flows that it supports. When we looked at the current process, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it, it's highly manual in nature and unfortunately has a very fragmented workflow, which is really due to the variation in the different data formats and the variation in the messaging mechanisms. As a result of this, naturally, there's going to be lower STP rates. There's a higher cost to support. Sometimes there's delayed settlements, which really, depending on where you're domiciled for reg purposes, could result in a fine. And I think even more important is that there is very limited scalability. It's a mostly manual process, and therefore also limits how agile firms can be. I think if we look at the COVID pandemic, we've seen a huge increase in volatility, a huge increase in volumes, and that only just adds further stress to the operational processes. The message that we created really allows a participant to retain a single core messaging language. They can benefit from the market standards, the set of standards we've created, which even if they retain their own native language, they can still achieve efficiency through adoption of the standards, and therefore can have a cleaner, more STP flow. The messaging, I think this is a very key thing to note. It is real-time messaging, and it's what we call a truly bidirectional flow. In terms of the adoption, whether this is through a vendor or point-to-point, I know that this is being used in the industry today, and those that are using it are now looking to obtain much greater efficiencies than they were before with the manual process. I think another key point to make is that from a global perspective, obviously we're the global post-trade working group, and this process is no different. It can be utilized in any region. It's not region specific. It can be utilized across a big range of differing trading relationships. I mentioned earlier, whether you have a PB give up, whether it's bilateral, and also it supports multiple operating support models. So where else are we heading? Where are we going in the post-trade space? What are we looking at? What are we working on? So the messaging that we created for the confirmation of the cash flow definitely covers off some of the current inefficiencies. But I think if the pandemic has shown us anything, as I mentioned earlier, it's just put a spotlight on the current stress and some of the operational processes. If you look a little bit closer at the payment and settlement space, and if you think about cash flow, your system or potentially your fund administrator creates that. You then need to validate it and you will confirm that. You then need to consider whether you're going to net that, or potentially at least looking at some sort of aggregation. And that process in itself has multiple steps. You then need to look at the instruction, managing the settlement of that, whether it's cash or securities. And all of that, if it's not done properly, can create these liquidity and funding constraints. I think by having the optionality for a messaging format that allows a firm to send a message that can allege and match, so within Fix today, I'm sure most of you are aware that you can use Fix for your allocation confirmation workflow through a whole host of different asset classes. And then ultimately, when you get down to some of the other stuff, if you have a message that can offer netting, can offer instruction and settlement all real time, then the opportunity for efficiency and higher STP only really increases. In terms of when we're going to be doing this, so in terms of releasing new standards or new proposed standards for instruction, settlement, some of the netting that I mentioned, we're aiming for Q1 of 2021 to have this through the relevant governance within the Fix community and ultimately the industry sign off. We want the collaboration. We want the industry to all agree that the messaging we're proposing is fit for purpose and is solving a real industry problem. There's a whole host of other work going on. There's a lot of repo work going on through the repo working group that Steve Kelly's running. We have work going on within the onboarding space. And I know a lot of people may look at onboarding as pre-trade, but there's actually a lot of inefficiencies downstream that exist because of inefficient onboarding upstream. If you think of, account mapping errors, trading relationships not set up, allocation inaccuracies, that there's a whole host of those errors that I know for sure we see today throughout some of our technology through our clients that we support. And I know that it is a problem in the industry. If you'd like to hear any more or get involved in anything we do, we are very open arms. We welcome anyone to kind of join our working groups. If you're a Fix member, if you're not, please do reach out to the Fix community office, and obviously they can help you navigate that space. That's it. I hope everyone continues to keep safe and well, and hopefully soon we'll be able to get back to doing these in a little bit more of a personal setting. Have a good day.